The story of the Apache people's migration from the north to the south is not just a simple journey, it is an epic saga of survival. This story began nearly 1,000 years ago. Journey from the north, children of the frozen tundra. Centuries ago, the Apache lived in the freezing regions of present-day Alaska and northwestern Canada. They were primarily forest hunters. However, due to climate change or pressure from powerful enemies, they began a collective journey southward. This migration did not take days, rather it spanned several generations as they moved down along the Rocky Mountains. Adaptation to the plains. On their way south, they reached the vast Great Plains of North America. Here, their lives transformed. They learned to hunt massive bison. Those who once ice-fished became master hunters of the plains. During this journey, they noticed that the further south they traveled, the hotter the weather became and the environment shifted. First encounter with the Pueblos. Around 1400 to 1500 AD, when they reached present-day New Mexico and Arizona, the Pueblo Indians were already living there. The Pueblos were peaceful farmers. Initially, the Apache began trading with them. They brought meat and animal hides from the mountains and exchanged them for corn and hand-woven cloth from the Pueblos. This trade became the foundation of their survival in the desert. Division and settlement. After settling in the southwest, the Apache split into different groups. From mountain peaks to desert floors, they established their empire. Those who took refuge in the mountains became known as the Chiricahua or Mescalero. Those who remained on the plains became the Jicarilla. In this way, they occupied a vast territory known as Apacheria. Arrival of the Spanish and a changing life. The biggest turning point in this story came around 1540 when the Spanish explorer Francisco Coronado arrived in the region. The first encounter between the Spanish and the Apache was one of curiosity, but when the Spanish brought horses, the Apache were astonished. They realized this strange creature would change their lives forever. They quickly learned to steal and taming horses. Those who once traveled miles on foot became the greatest cavalry warriors of America. These horses provided the strength that allowed them to fight against European powers for the next 300 years.
The Invincible Warriors of the Desert, Stories of Society and Lifestyle. Once the Apache adapted to the deserts and Rocky Mountains of the Southwest, their lives became harsh yet highly disciplined. The core mantras of their survival were speed and secrecy. Matriarchal society, the power of women. One of the most fascinating aspects of Apache society was its matriarchal structure. The head of the family was the mother or grandmother. When a young man married, he had to leave his own family and live with his wife's family, matriarchality. Property and lineage were traced through the mother's side. Women did not just manage the household, they took up arms when necessary and were exceptionally skilled riders. A warrior woman named Lozen remains immortal in Apache history. It was said she possessed a spiritual gift to sense the location of the enemy. The Wickiup, mobile homes of the desert. Being nomadic, they did not build permanent structures. Instead, they constructed the Wickiup. This was a dome-shaped hut made of branches and grass. These dwellings stayed cool even in the scorching desert heat. The greatest advantage was mobility. If an enemy attacked or if they needed to move in search of food, these huts could be dismantled in minutes and rebuilt quickly at a new location. Trained warriors and survival tactics. Apache children underwent rigorous training from a very young age. Before a teenager could become a full warrior, he had to prove his endurance, for example, by running several miles with a mouthful of water and returning without spilling a single drop. This trained them in breath control and the ability to survive long periods in the desert without water. They had an intimate knowledge of desert flora. The mescal or agave plant was their primary food source. They would pit roast or dry this plant to store it for long periods. It is from this plant that one group earned the name Mescalero Apache. Religion and the mountain spirits. The Apache believed that nature is everything. Spirits reside in the mountains, the wind, and the water. Their most sacred ceremony was the mountain spirit dance. Dancers wore large wooden crowns and painted their bodies white. They believed that through this dance, evil spirits were driven away and warriors became invincible in battle. Adaptation and raiding. To the Apache, raiding, taking supplies from other areas, was not considered a crime. Rather, it was a survival strategy and an act of bravery. They would take cattle and horses from Spanish ranches, but would rarely take everything, ensuring that the ranch would remain functional so they could return for supplies in the future. This strategic lifestyle kept them undefeated in the Southwest for hundreds of years.
Blood-soaked desert, the Spanish and Mexican conflict. When the European Spanish and later the Mexicans arrived in the Southwest to establish mines and ranches, a clash with the Apache became inevitable. This was no ordinary war. It was a desperate struggle for survival. Slavery versus freedom. As the Spanish pushed northward from Mexico, their primary goal was to capture the Apache and force them to labor as slaves in silver mines. But the Apache were fiercely independent. Instead of accepting chains, they chose to fight. When the Spanish introduced firearms, the Apache countered by combining their ancient mastery of the bow with their newly acquired horses. They would ambush Spanish supply caravans and vanish into the rugged mountains within seconds. Mexican brutality and the scalp bounty. The situation worsened significantly after Mexico gained independence in 1821. Unable to subdue the Apache militarily, the Mexican government passed a horrific and inhumane law. They offered a bounty for Apache scalps, 100 pesos for the scalp of an adult male, with smaller but substantial rewards for the scalps of women and children. This brutal trade in human scalps effectively destroyed any hope for peace or diplomacy. It planted a seed of profound and lasting hatred toward Mexicans in the hearts of the Apache. Mangus Coloradas, the rise of a giant. The most influential leader during this era was Mangus Coloradas. Standing nearly 6 feet 7 inches tall, he was a physically imposing and brilliant strategist. He realized that if the Apache remained divided, they would fall, so he worked to unify the various bands. Once, Mexicans lured him into a peace talk, only to bind him to a tree and whip him nearly to death. He never forgot this humiliation. Afterward, he unleashed such terror upon Mexican settlements that many villages were completely abandoned. A tragedy, the origin of Geronimo's revenge. The ultimate turning point occurred in 1858. While the warrior, then known as Goyacla, was away, a band of Mexican soldiers raided his camp. They brutally murdered his elderly mother, his young wife, and his 3 children. When he returned and saw the carnage, his grief transformed into an infinite, icy rage. It is said that from that day on, he never grieved like a normal man again. He became a living machine of war. The Mexicans feared him so much that upon seeing him, they would scream to Saint Jerome, San Geronimo, for mercy. From those terrified cries, his legendary name Geronimo was born. The aftermath of war. Through decades of conflict, the Apache proved that even without modern weaponry, bravery and a deep understanding of the terrain could defeat a much larger army. However, the bloodshed was constant. Mexicans often resorted to treachery, poisoning Apache groups during feasts or murdering them during fake peace negotiations. This deep-seated mutual distrust made the situation even more volatile when the Americans eventually arrived.
Betrayal and the Wildfires of War, the U.S.-Apache conflict. Following the Mexican-American War in 1848, the regions of present-day Arizona and New Mexico came under American control. Initially, the Apache sought a friendly relationship with the Americans, as both shared a common enemy, the Mexicans. However, a single minor misunderstanding altered the course of history forever. The Bascom Affair, a historic betrayal. In 1861, a white farmer's child was kidnapped, later discovered to have been done by another tribe. George Bascom, a young lieutenant in the U.S. Army, blamed the Apache leader Cochise for the incident. Under the guise of a peaceful discussion, he summoned Cochise for a meeting. Cochise arrived peacefully with his family members, but Bascom attempted to take them prisoner. In an incredible feat, Cochise sliced through the side of the tent and escaped, but his family remained in captivity. This single event shattered a decade of peace and ignited the wildfires of war across the Southwest. Cochise's revenge and mountain warfare. Cochise was the most respected leader of the Chiricahua Apache. To avenge Bascom's betrayal, he blocked mountain passes and began attacking American stagecoaches and miners. Cochise's guerrilla tactics were so effective that hundreds of U.S. soldiers could not find him despite exhaustive searches. The warriors would paint themselves to blend so perfectly with the Rocky Mountain terrain that they were invisible even from a few feet away. Dragon Springs and Apache Pass.
In 1862, during the Civil War, the Apache faced U.S. mountain howitzers artillery for the first time at the Battle of Apache Pass. Although they fought with immense bravery, they were forced to retreat in the face of modern shell fire. This battle reinforced the Apache belief that stealth and ambush were more effective than direct confrontation. Tom Jeffords, an unusual friendship. Amidst this brutal war, a story of unique friendship emerged. Tom Jeffords, an American male superintendent, rode alone into Cochise's stronghold to propose peace. Cochise was so impressed by the white man's courage that they became blood brothers. Through Jeffords' mediation, General Oliver Otis Howard was eventually able to negotiate a peace treaty with Cochise in 1872. Relocation to the reservation. The peace treaty initially allowed the Apache to live in their beloved mountain homelands. However, after Cochise's death, the U.S. government broke the agreement. They decided to forcibly relocate the Apache to San Carlos, an arid, barren, and hellish region. This was a supreme insult to the Apache people and set the stage for further resistance.
Geronimo, the last resistance. After the death of Cochise and the forced relocation of the Apache to the hellish San Carlos reservation, the fires of resentment began to blaze. That fire was named Geronimo, the spiritual warrior. Geronimo was more than just a warrior. He was a medicine man or a spiritual leader. The Apache believed Geronimo possessed supernatural powers. It was said that he could anticipate the movements of the enemy, had the power to stop the wind, and most remarkably, it was believed that no bullet could ever pierce his body. This faith gave his warriors the courage to remain invincible in their hearts. Repeated escapes and the reign of terror. When the U.S. government seized Apache lands and tried to force them into farming, Geronimo refused to submit. He escaped from the reservation 3 times. Each time he fled, he took a small band of followers and launched guerrilla raids along the U.S.-Mexico border with such ferocity that the entire region was paralyzed with fear. To capture this one man, the U.S. government deployed an unprecedented force. 5,000 soldiers, 1/4 of the entire U.S. Army at the time, along with thousands of Mexican troops, were tasked with finding him. War against the shadows. Geronimo's battle tactics were legendary. He and his small band of 30 to 40 warriors traversed thousands of miles of desert and mountain terrain. While the U.S. soldiers grew exhausted and weary, Geronimo's group remained fresh and agile. They would hide in the crevices of mountains and vanish so completely that the Americans began to believe they were sorcerers. Apache scouts, the enemy within. When the U.S. military realized they could never catch Geronimo on their own, they adopted a new strategy. They recruited other Apache men as Apache scouts, using promises of money and safety. Geronimo's own people began to track his footprints and reveal his secret hiding spots. This betrayal from within was the primary cause of his eventual downfall. The final surrender, 1886. Finally, on September 4, 1886, at Skeleton Canyon in Arizona, Geronimo surrendered to General Nelson Miles. At the time of his surrender, he was accompanied by only 16 warriors. He famously remarked, "Once I moved like the wind. Now I surrender." His surrender marked the end of organized armed resistance by Native Americans in North America forever.
The unyielding spirit, captivity, and the modern Apache nation. The surrender of Geronimo in 1886 marked the beginning of the darkest chapter in Apache history. However, they did not disappear. Instead, they transformed themselves over time, finding new ways to survive and thrive. Long-term captivity, prisoners of war. Following their surrender, Geronimo and his followers were sent to Fort Pickens, Florida, as criminals. Shockingly, not only were the warriors imprisoned, but even the Apache scouts who had assisted the U.S. military were also taken captive. Many Apache died due to the damp climate and starvation. They remained prisoners of war for 27 years, one of the longest and most shameful periods of captivity in American history. Cultural suppression and boarding schools. At the beginning of the 20th century, the U.S. government adopted the policy, "Kill the Indian, save the man." Apache children were forcibly sent to distant boarding schools. Their hair was cut, speaking their native language was banned, and they were forced to convert to Christianity. However, the Apache were resilient. While they outwardly followed the white man's rules, they secretly preserved their language and the tradition of the mountain spirit dance within their homes. Valor in World War II, the Apache Code Talkers. During World War I and World War II, Apache warriors joined the U.S. military. Much like the Navajo, Apache soldiers used their complex native language to transmit secret messages on the battlefield. These codes were never broken by the Germans or the Japanese. Ironically, they fought and made history for the very country that had once held them captive. Geronimo's final years. Geronimo was eventually moved to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. In his final years, he became something of a celebrity. He participated in the 1904 World's Fair and rode a horse in President Theodore Roosevelt's inaugural parade. In 1909, while on his deathbed suffering from pneumonia, he expressed his final regret. "I should never have surrendered. I should have fought until I was the last man alive." The modern Apache Nation. Today, the Apache are no longer a defeated people. They are a sovereign nation governed by their own autonomous tribal governments. Economy. Apache reservations in Arizona and New Mexico have become hubs for tourism, timber resources, and massive casino enterprises. Preservation. They have developed digital apps and specialized schools to protect and revitalize their language. Heritage. Traditions like the sunrise ceremony, a coming-of-age ritual for young women, and sacred warrior dances are still celebrated today with immense pride. Conclusion. The history of the Apache is a saga of blood, tears, and infinite courage. They have proven that those who embrace the mountains and the desert as their own can never be truly erased from the earth.